strong moral principles and having the quality of being honest, an honest person. Because remember what I've said you are supposed to do. There has to be some honesty, totality of honesty, not just a certain degree of. And uprightness. If this is what integrity means, that you have to have moral principles, quality of being honest, and that is the honesty and uprightness, then you can see what is demanded of you, what is required of you as a researcher. The Bible does not leave us without a guide. God was the first researcher, in my opinion, and that's why I went into that kind of a specialization, because I see God in everything. And in Genesis, we start with the word integrity. We first find the word integrity in Genesis chapter 20, verse 5. And there it refers to Abimelech, the governor, the leader of Gezer, I think that was Egypt by then. Abimelech tells the Lord, the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have done this. Do you know what that this is? He had taken Sarah because Abraham told him that Sarah is my sister. And so he looked at Sarah and said, oh, this is the sister of this sojourner, and she looks beautiful. Give her to me for a wife. And Abraham also tells Abimelech, when Abimelech goes to him and says, I told you that she's my sister, and she's my sister, because she's not the daughter of my mother, but she's the daughter of my father. So if she's the daughter of my father, we share the same father, though different mothers, she is my sister. So I've told you the truth. But remember, he did not say, she's my sister and my wife. He only mentioned the sister part because he was afraid. Abimelech took Sarah. And he says, I took her in the integrity of my heart and the innocency of my hands, because I was told she's not anybody's wife. We are talking about integrity. And he's mentioning integrity here. I'm honest. I'm upright. That is what Abimelech is saying. I'm upright. And Abraham in Genesis 20, verse 11 says to Abimelech, because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and therefore these people will slay me for my wife's sake. If I said my wife, they will slay me. Now, between these two people, who has integrity? Abimelech or Abraham? Or none? What would you say? What would you say, my sister? He said the truth. Okay, Abimelech said the truth. Somebody else? Didn't Abraham say the truth? Because this was his sister. He said the truth that this is his sister, Professor Bondi. It's half-truth. Is half-truth good enough? So I bring this to us as researchers to think about as we start this conference and this training together, that half-truth is not good enough. But let us see what else is happening here. We find also David in Psalms 26, verse 1 saying, Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in mine integrity. I have trusted also in the Lord, therefore I shall not slide. Those who walk in integrity, in the uprightness, in the honesty, do not slide, as we get from David here in Psalm 26, verse 1. The information that the researcher gathers is usually to inform practice, to inform policies of nations, organizations, and institutions. And if there is no integrity in the process, you can imagine how researchers can damage the whole world. You, seated in front of me here, are capable of bringing down nations because of half-truths, because of no truths, just because of lack of integrity. So researchers cannot afford to be devoid of integrity, the honesty, the uprightness of morals. I like the fact that God is there for us in the beginning, in the book of Genesis. And he tells Abimelech to restore Sarah to Abraham, lest all of them die. In other words, you cannot afford to lack this integrity, the real integrity. But I want us to concentrate on the grace of God, God's grace. Because if it wasn't for God's grace, by the time Abraham is getting back his wife, somebody else would have known her also, right? You know, Abimelech says, I did not move close to her. But the Lord says, I restrained you. God restrains us from doing wrong things. This morning, what I want to say is, may this same God who restrained Abimelech from doing evil restrain us from doing things that are not honest as researchers, things that are not of moral value, things that do not represent God, because we see God in the beginning talking about integrity and valuing integrity. And God says to Abimelech, I did not want you to sin against me, not to sin against Abraham, but to sin against me. Some of us may not be the principal investigators. You may be co-researchers or participants. And co-researchers or participants, whatever your role is, there is integrity that is required of us. You know, as I have said, a researcher may not be excused for telling lies or half-truth. There are circumstances where you tell half-truth because you are not the principal investigator, and you say, since the principal investigator, the one who attracted the research funds, wants the results to state this way, then that is what I report. I'm only writing, God, I'm only writing. I'm writing what the principal investigator wants. Half-truth, right? Sometimes data may say something else, and we report something else for fear of the principal investigator, and to protect our status. Like Abraham said, I was fearing that they may slay me. They may fire me from the research group. They may fire me from my job. They might fire me. They may slay me. This morning, my message is there is requirement of all researchers at different levels, whether you be the principal investigator, the co-researcher, the participant in the research, providing the information that is going to be put together, that we hold the honesty, the uprightness of the morality that is required of us. We see some of this falsehood when we read the book of Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, if you read it, you find the researchers, I would call them research assistants, because I see God himself in the book of Numbers as the principal investigator. And I see Moses as the co-researcher, assistant researcher to God himself, being told to collect, to get the participant, the people, the research assistants to go and gather information in a land that God is going to give to them. And when they came back, you know the story, so I don't want to dwell there. Only 2 people said exactly what they saw. The rest of the people were afraid, and therefore they saw giants that could clear them in no minute. So they forgot the God who sent them, who is greater than the giants that they saw. So in all this, I want to say this morning as I close that your perception as a researcher should not be upfront rather than the data that you gathered. Your interpretation should not be biased by your perception. You report what you gathered and what you have analyzed and what you see. Do not misrepresent the participants who have given you that data. And lastly, may the good Lord, who has given us the mind, the body, the strength, the air that we breathe, go before us when we do research in every corner, wherever God has placed us. And may the research that we do represent God himself. Because whatever truth that we are to share is a glimpse of light of the truth that God himself has revealed. So may God be with you as you continue in the research process. Thank you.
We can do a little bit better. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you very much, Professor Rispa Awor, for the words of encouragement this morning. Let me just echo a little bit of information, or let me share some information with you. Number 1 on my list is time consciousness. You have the program in your hand, and you will realize that we have put time against every activity, and we will go by that. So when you are doing whatever you are doing, maybe you are eating, or keep that in mind, that we will not wait for anybody. Washroom is just exit this hall, take the left, my left, and then you will see the washroom right on your right hand. Exit the room, climb up a little, and the washroom is right on your right hand. Please, we will encourage you to wear your tag, your name tag all the time for easy identification. You will also realize that we have given you mail cards. And keep it well, use it when it is time for you to use it. When we are going for snack, we will want you to show your mail card. In other words, the food and everything we have prepared is for those who have registered. And once you have registered, you will be given a card, snack card, breakfast, and so on and so forth, for those who would like to or who have opted for it. There is one announcement that I'm hesitant to give now, but let me just share it with you briefly. On Sunday, we are planning for game drive. In Kenya here, we call it safari. Safari. We want to go and see the animals, the lions and so on and so forth. We would like to plan it half day. And for the half day, you can see all the animals that you would like to see. Tiger, rhino, not tiger, we don't have tiger here. Lion, giraffe, rhino, and all the other animals. So, if you are interested, please register at the registration desk. They will give you all the information, the amount you have to prepare, and all the information is there. Please do that today, because if we have the number of those who would like to go, then we can begin the preparation and the arrangement. So we would like to do that when we are sure of those who would like to go. Thank you so much. Let me see those of you who came from other countries other than Kenya. Please raise your hand. Okay. We have quite a sizable number of you. Thank you. And if I ask that from online, there are a huge number watching from online, virtually. Huge number of people. More than about 300 people watching from online. And they opted to watch it virtually. And we are so glad you decided to come here. You add flavor to our program this morning. Those of you, I understand there are about 5 of you coming from Kisii University. If you are here, please raise your hand. Wow. Welcome. Stand up. Let's see you from Kisii University. Thank you. Let's give them a hand. One institution sponsoring. I think you are even more than 5. The remaining are watching virtually, isn't it? Yeah, that was what the news I got. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. And those of you from AUA, could you stand up and let's see you from Adventist University of Africa? Okay. Let's give them a hand also. AUA, welcome. Thank you so much. And those coming from all other places, please. If you are not from Kisii, you are not from AUA, you are not from US, any other country represented here? From Uganda. Very good, Uganda. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes? South Africa. Let's clap for South Africa. Thank you very much. We are so glad you are here, and we are going to have a wonderful time together. God bless you. Ghana. Ghana is here. Ghana. Thank you. Any other country I have left out? Yes. Kenyan, but coming from Dubai. Kenyan from Dubai. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. My name, yes. Liberia, but coming from Sweden, Gothenburg. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. My name is Daniel Ganu. You have seen my name many times. We have interacted, and we welcome you once again. God bless you.
very good morning to everyone present here today. The guest of honor, Professor Walter Ayeva, the Chief Executive Officer of National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Marcela Mawaka from Commission for University Education, Professor Duan McBride from Andrews University, Mr. Boniface Wekesa from National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation, the speakers of the conference, the delegates of the conference, and I want to recognize Professor Patrick Manu, the Vice Chancellor of University of Arusha. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the beautiful country of Kenya and to the magnificent campus of Adventist University of Africa. There are some who are attending the conference virtually and others face-to-face. We welcome all of you to these two conferences. You're welcome to our campus and we wish you a pleasant stay. And if you are attending face-to-face, please take a few minutes and walk around the campus and enjoy its beauty. This morning, I would like to invite you and congratulate you for your interest and support to this very important aspect of research, ethics in research. This training program is organized with the theme, Promoting Research Integrity. Further to that, I also want to invite you to the other conference organized by the Adventist Human Subject Researchers Association, AHSRA, the African chapter, with the theme, Seeking Excellence in Human Subject Research to Manage the Impact of COVID-19 in Africa. These two historic training programs, I believe, will greatly enhance your knowledge and understanding on the subject and sharpen your research skills, and also will help build capacity for ethics review committees, thereby improving the quality and reliability of research. Sometimes we notice, in an attempt to reach one's academic and career goals, researchers may be in a haste to overlook the ethical dimension. This conference is organized to put the spotlight on ethics in research. While there may be mechanisms for ensuring the ethical aspects in research in the form of ethical review approval and plagiarism policies, etc., we need to raise awareness and raise the bar on ethical dimensions of research. It is my sincere hope and prayer that at the end of the conference, we will not only be equipped with the knowledge on ethics in research, but also champion the cause of ethical research. At this time, I want to thank Professor Daniel Ganu, the president of AHSRA, the African chapter, and his team for organizing these two conferences. I have gone through the program and the titles of various presentations, and some excellent presentations are lined up for you, and take advantage of it. I wish each and every delegate a wonderful educative and learning experience as you attend these two conferences. Once again, we welcome you to Adventist University of Africa campus, and please let us know if you need any assistance. We are here to serve you. Karibu.
Thank you very much. That is our Vice Chancellor. You might ask, where is he? Yesterday, his daughter got married in South Africa. So he has to be with his daughter, but he is coming today, and tomorrow he will be with us. And thank you so much for listening and for that welcome remarks. We are going to take 10 minutes break. How many minutes? 10 minutes break. And you can just walk out, and we have some snacks out there. If you want to grab a cup and come and sit here, you are welcome. But the break is just 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we are coming back, and then we will continue. Your 10 minutes start now. Thank you.
morning again. Oh, thank you very much. If you're still outside, we welcome you in so that we can proceed with the program. But as earlier indicated, we will proceed anyway. Welcome to this session. I have the distinguished honor and pleasure of introducing my friend and mentor and a very important person at Andrews University, Professor Dwayne McBride. Dr. McBride has been a professor at Andrews for several years. And Andrews is in Berrien Springs, Michigan, USA, for those who may not know. He is also the director of IPA, Institute of Prevention and Drug Addictions, right? And we are also delighted that in our trip, Mrs. McBride also came with a stand, and why don't we give a round of applause to welcome her to AUA. So we believe that you will be able to benefit from the presentation by Dr. Dwayne McBride this morning. Please welcome. I cannot say everything about Dr. Dwayne because it would take quite some time because of what he has done in the area of research. He's been the chair for grant reviews for 15 years at the NIH. So there's plenty I could say. Please welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, come on. All right. Yeah, okay. So, oops. There we go. All right, it's on. I'm very privileged to be here. I was here once before, a few years ago, and to your beautiful campus in this wonderful country. When I went home for my first visit, I told my wife, I think the Garden of Eden was in Kenya because this is such a nice climate. Every day it's 80, a low of 60. That's about as good as it gets. So we're very happy to be here. I said, Amy, you've got to come with me and experience Eden. So we're very happy to be here. One of my focuses is kind of the background of what happens, what Dr. Ongo is going to be talking about, the emergence of institutional review boards. And said I'm a senior research professor at Andrews University, which means I'm semi-retired. I still work and no one pays me. I'm the director of the Institute for Prevention of Addiction at Andrews University. And a bit of background. I taught my first college class in 1972, I know before your grandparents were born. So I've had a long career. Is that 60 years? Yeah. Oh, it's 60 years. I've chaired a number of grant review committees for the National Institutes of Health in the United States. I've been on the grant reviews committee for the Centers of Disease Control, National Institute of Justice, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and once for the government of Austria. I'm not sure how that happened. I've really served on these committees from about 1977 to 2020. So in my career, I've really seen a lot in terms of the evolving standards of institutional review boards. We had a previous talk that talked about the integrity of data. And boy, is that important. I'll be talking about that in a later talk. But I want to talk about when I began my career and taught my first college class in 1972, there were no institutional review boards. Human beings, there's a book of Judges. Every human being does what's right in their own eyes. Well, guess what? That's kind of what we did in academia and in scientific research. Physicians. Do physicians in Kenya wear white coats when they run around? Do white coats occur here?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Well, in the United States, you can always tell a physician because they run around in white coats. And, that physicians in almost every country, I looked it up here in Kenya, in almost every country have a high level of prestige and trust. We trust physicians with our lives. I've had heart surgery. I trusted my physician with my life. In fact, I carry a cow valve. It's a good cow valve. It's worked for 15 years. But we really trust physicians with our lives. We trust them to do no harm and to keep us healthy. Again, that white coat. The trust in physicians has also affected how we see scientists in general. We often see researchers and scientists working in the laboratory for our best interest, sitting at their computer, working for our best interest in the betterment of humanity. So scientists in general, physicians particularly, have a high prestige and status in almost every country in the world. And we grant them a lot of privileges. You know, they can touch us, poke us, and cut us, and we trust them to do that. However, amidst that trust, there's also a bit of a counter fear. Have you ever heard of Frankenstein? All right, so Frankenstein's kind of global. All right, you remember the story of Frankenstein? It's a mad scientist. The scientist is creating a dead person to a live person. So amidst our trust in physicians, our trust in science, we also have this idea of the mad scientist who's out there doing horrible things, who's out there creating monsters. If you remember the village in Germany, they stormed the lab to stop the monster. So in almost every culture, there are elements of distrust. Sometimes we have a fear of experts. COVID. You know, COVID in the United States is very interesting. I'm not sure how it exists in other. Now, I do read the literature from other parts of the world. Do you know there's a lot of mistrust of the vaccine? And some of you may have that mistrust. I live in Bering Springs, Michigan, and we have a couple of churches that are anti-vax. They oppose the vaccine. They've had a lot of funerals, but they believe the vaccine will kill you. In fact, I have a barber who is so convinced that I will be, he's shocked I'm dead. I'm not dead, because he thought I'd be dead in a year, and I had my first vaccine 14 months ago, and I just got my fourth, actually. He told me if I'm alive in February of 2023, I will get free haircuts the rest of my life. Wow, that's great. So I have to make it for 11 months, guys, so I can get my free haircuts. But this is kind of what I'm saying. We trust science. We believe in the integrity of research. We're scholars. You're researchers. You're doing incredible things. But there's also this counter view out there, not among the majority, but among some within our community that really aren't sure about science. It's mysterious. It occurs in a lab. We maybe all can't understand what's going on, so we're a bit suspicious. Well, where did the institutional review, in fact, one of our real jobs, frankly, as scientists, is integrity and transparency. That was really hit very, very well this morning. Everything you do must be done with transparency, documentation, and integrity. All right, I'll divert just a minute. One of the things I've done for the National Institutes of Health in the United States, I've been on what they call scientific integrity review boards. Someone reports a scientist who has defrauded the data. My worst example was there is a scientist who is trying to develop a medicine that would allow transplants to occur without immune suppressant drugs. He claimed he found a simple drug in which he could transplant black skin on a white mouse and white skin on a black mouse. He reported the pictures. He showed, see, this works. Here's the drug. Look how beautifully it works. Well, one of his graduate assistants sent a note to the NIH and said, he's fraud. We did an investigation, and you know what he did? He took white markers and colored black skin, black markers and colored white skin. Be sure your sins will find you out, particularly when you felt tip to change the color of skin. You know, incredibly stupid. But that is part of what we face sometimes when people don't trust science. They worry we fudge the data. Now, he'll never get another federal grant. In fact, to this day, he works as a physician in a small town in New England. So never fake your data. It's better to be honest and say, I found nothing, or I found the opposite, than fake your data. All right, so where did IRBs begin? Well, one of the most horrible experiences that we've had in the world was World War II. Nuremberg. In fact, I'm of partial German descent. My mother's family came from Germany. My name's McBride, that's Irish. But my mother's family came from Germany. And the Germans, is a fascinating part of their culture, kept detailed records of their atrocities. Very few cultures keep detailed records of their sins, but the Germans did. And after World War II, there were trials about the German medical experiments. They were called the Nuremberg trials. Something emerged called the Nuremberg Code. The Nuremberg Code said, look, this is horrific. In the name of science, great evil was done. People were almost frozen to death, and they experimented with how they warm up. Horrible things. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands died in these medical experiments. And they recommended that any human subject must be voluntary and they must know the risks. However, no country on earth adopted the Nuremberg Code because they said, well, those are Nazis. They're not us. We would never do those kinds of things. That doesn't apply to us at all. In 1964, in Helsinki, Finland, the World Medical Association said, look, why doesn't anyone sign up for these codes? What's wrong with you? Why don't we do that? Again, it was voluntary. They focused on voluntary research, must be confidential, and must be risk-benefit. The subject must know the risk. However, again, there was no enforcement. Because after all, we're not Nazis. We would never do anything harmful. In 1951, in the United States, the National Institutes of Health required all internal clinician research done in the federal government, by the federal government, to meet the Nuremberg codes. That's voluntary, it's confidential, and risk-benefit. However, they didn't enforce it for anyone working outside the government. You may have heard of the Tuskegee syphilis study. This was one of the most horrific things done in the United States. It's not that they infected anyone with syphilis, but individuals who came down with syphilis, the National Institutes of Health watched them die. They watched them die over decades. They documented the deterioration on a very regular basis. These are African American males being studied by white male scientists. Now, when the study first began, there was no cure for syphilis. However, within a very few years, there was penicillin. Did they offer that to these men? They did not. They literally documented their mental, physical deterioration until they died. Well, they're not Nazis. They didn't infect them. They just watched them die. So, this was one of the most horrible things to occur in the United States. And to this day, African Americans are hesitant to take part in medical studies. African Americans have one of the lowest rates of getting vaccines in the United States because of Tuskegee. This is a burden that medical science carries to this day, even though it began 60, 70, 80 years ago. So, one of the things I want to point out, if you violate IRB, you can affect decades, if not a century, of research in your country of how people will view science and view medical experiments. Now, and sometimes in the social behavioral sciences and human subjects research, well, we would never do that. So we don't think it applies to us. Well, there's a study called the Milgram experiments done in 1963 that had real ethical issues. In this study, a psychologist, we kind of wondered in research, how could a country such as Germany, they gave us Martin Luther, they gave us Bonhoeffer, Tillich, great theologians, great religious music, how could they obey Hitler? So we did a study in which literally poor college sophomores are experimented on in the United States all the time. And so we got college sophomores, and the scientist, a white coat, said, look, this is an experiment to determine how people learn, if negative reinforcement helps people learn. So the person in the lab that all the students were watching through a glass, he was in on it, and he was all wired up, and the students were told, if they get the learning assignment wrong, you give them a little shock, and we'll see if that helps them learn it better next time. okay? But the person in the room knew they were supposed to mess up. So they messed up. Experimenters said, all right, give them a little shock. They still messed up. Give them a little more shock. They still messed up. Give them a little more shock. And they kept going to a red zone in which the person was writhing on the floor in pain. It did show that authority can make people do things they would never do. But the students were traumatized, and no one debriefed them, no one explained it to them. So the Milgram experiment caused real harm psychologically to participants in human subjects research. Okay, well, that had more repercussions. In 1974, again 2 years after I started teaching college, the National Research Act of the United States required some type of institutional review board process for all human subjects funded by the federal government. The focus is on voluntary, confidential, and risk-benefit, and that's what Dr. Ong will be talking about. This process resulted in a report called the Belmont Report. The Belmont Report was in 1979. So again, until 1979, we didn't have good processes. And I was already doing research in 1973 on NIH-funded research, but we still were not working without definitive guidelines. There are three concepts that are so crucial in understanding what you have to do in human subjects research. Beneficence, respect, and justice. And like many fancy words in English, they come from Latin. Beneficence is a Latin origin that means doing well, behaving in the right and honorable way, behaving properly. In human subject research, it also talks about risk-benefit ratio. Look, there's always some risk in research, but the benefit must far outweigh the risk, reviewed by an institutional review board. Human subject research must have a soul, a purpose that really makes a difference in human lives. You're not just doing this because wouldn't it be fun to know? But we're doing it to say, if we do this research, and if it turns out to be valid, true, then it will make a difference in our society. It will benefit us. And the reason I have a soul on there, it's kind of a religious term, but I was once on a National Institute of Health Review Committee, and I thought the research was technically very, very good, but I didn't like it. And I was trying to explain why I didn't like it. And one of my colleagues, a Christian at actually Texas Christian University, kept saying, what Dwayne is trying to say, this grant has no soul. It has no benefit. It's technically perfect, but if it works, who cares? It doesn't benefit anyone. And that's part of the important criteria of beneficence. In other words, don't do a study just because it would be interesting or just because I'd like to know, but because it makes a difference in your community. It makes a difference. Respect. Now, one of the most popular songs in the United States is by Aretha Franklin, and it's called R-E-S-P-E-C-T, respect. Well, what does it mean to have respect? It's also of Latin origin, and it means due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, and traditions of others. That's a complex thing. For human subject research, it can mean respecting time. Well, we just went through an interesting process at Andrews, and reimbursing costs and time. If you have funded research from a national agency, from a foundation, and you're taking an hour or two of a person's time, maybe you need to pay the cost of them getting there. Maybe you need to feed them lunch. Maybe you need to reimburse them for their time. Now, we just had a few-day debate at Andrews because the finance office at Andrews decided we could not do this. To pay people would violate some rules and laws that I never understood, and neither did Mordecai, and neither did anyone else. But we did a lot of research and pointed out you have got to respect others. The Belmont Report clearly says you have to show respect. You have to show respect. And that can be time. If you're taking, I'm not sure. If you're taking someone's time who works by the hour, and you're taking 3 hours of their time, and you aren't paying them, that could be disrespectful. I served once on a federal jury in the United States. And, they put you in a room. You never know if you're going to get called. You sit there all day, and there's a chair next to me. And so a few hours after I started sitting down, two federal marshals walk in with a guy handcuffed between them. They sit him down next to me and handcuffed him to the chair. I'm going, okay, am I in the jury room or am I in the defendant's room? Maybe a little nervous. I probably looked at him strangely. He said, are you being paid for sitting in this jury room? I said, well, yes. I was working then at the University of Miami in Florida. And I said, the University of Miami, this is their commitment to civic responsibility. They pay my full salary for sitting here today. He said, well, I'm an independent truck driver. No one's paying me today. He said, I am not making a penny, and I'm not being able to feed my family, pay for my gas. It's just not right. You're right. So remember, part of respect is respecting the time. That can even be when you're scheduling your research. Don't schedule your research at 10 a.m. if they're working all day. Evenings, perhaps, if they're not working, but perhaps feed them. So respect is important for your subjects. We're not arrogant scholars. We respect those that we are studying. Understanding the culture, individual concerns, and issues that may affect the subject. As I said, for African Americans in the United States, there's a suspicion of medicine. So how do you deal with that? There's a fear sometimes of things, words that you may use. For example, if you're feeding people, if you're feeding a Jewish study, don't serve pork. If you're dealing with Adventists, make sure it's vegetarian. You're dealing with Muslims, no pork. So you have to understand the cultures that you're studying, even in the foods you offer them. I've also, when I've done long-term studies, for Muslim groups I've studied, I make sure there are prayer breaks in a prayer room where they can pray. So respect the culture you're studying. Make sure that in your data collection process, you respect that. And we also need to understand the risk-benefits in the subject's cultural context. In other words, does it mean something within their culture? If you find something positive, well, it means something to that group, to those individuals, to the culture they're a part of. That's also important. You may not want to, it's hard to convince someone that, well, this won't mean anything to the people you're a part of, but it'll mean something over here. So respect is, again, cost and time. Make sure you understand the culture's symbols from the food, the words you use, even the room that you're in. Will it be comfortable for them? I've done studies of very working class people in the United States, and if I do interviews or studies with less educated people, they often feel more comfortable in a back room in a bar. They won't feel comfortable if they've never gone to church in the church. So kind of respect the culture you're studying and collect your data there. Justice. Boy, justice is a really heavy word. Again, it means from Latin, and it's righteousness, equity, a profound sense of fairness. Are we being fair? Now, what this means, this is a heavy concept. What this means is that the distribution, the cost of research are in everybody. We don't study you to benefit someone else. That everyone who is being studied needs to be part of that risk benefit. So the burden of research needs to be shared. And the benefits of research need to be shared. We don't conduct research for one group and not for the other. We don't benefit one group and not the other. It's also important to include individuals from all parts of the socio-demographic groups in your society. So you don't conduct it for this tribe and not that tribe, this ethnic group, not that ethnic group. And I have something called the story of normal bodies. All right, this is an interesting story. This is my early days of sitting on NIH grant review committees. In about 1976 or 77, there was a grant that came through my committee, and it talked about, it was developing an antagonist to narcotic addiction, that if you took this drug, you couldn't feel high. And this is an exact quote from that application. We're only studying normal bodies, so we're only studying men. Okay, I'm seeing that look. That is exactly what it said on a federal application. We're only studying normal bodies, therefore we only study men. Normal bodies were male. Guess what? As a result of that application, there are congressional hearings. A congressman from Colorado by the name of Pat Schroeder, hold that up. I've gotten to testify a few times before Congress. That was one of them. Okay? This was an unthinking man. Well, I don't want to deal with women who have menstrual cycles. I don't want to deal with women who are pregnant. I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to deal with normal bodies. Okay, well, there is now a law in the United States. Every grant has to have a special section. Are they including every ethnic cultural group, both genders, children and adults? Now, that's not always, you don't always have to do that. For example, if you're studying prostate cancer, you don't have to include women, okay? But if you're studying breast cancer, guess what? You have to include men. Did you know that in the United States, at least 5% of all victims of breast cancer are males? Okay, so in other words, the whole idea is that you must think that, is my study going to be related to the needs of what type of groups? Young, old, black, Hispanic, white, Asian. I must make sure that I include that. So, that's why justice, burden and benefit inclusion, very, very important. I'm never sure what happened to the guy who wrote that grant, frankly. I'm not sure he ever got a federal grant again, but he did get to be dragged through Congress. Researchers in the IRB process. Look, researchers must respect the IRB process. It's designed to protect the subject and the researcher. Look, sometimes it's hard to think of every ethical component. Sometimes it's hard to think of everything you should do. And IRB is a committee that tries to make sure you cover that. The Bible says but 2 or 3 witnesses are required. Well, that's really what the IRB process is. You're not doing it alone, you're doing it with 2 or 3 others. Going through the IRB process means that you have met the ethical standards of your time. It's ethical, it's moral, has legal standing. Never, never ignore the IRB process. In many countries, if you ignore it, you're shut down. Literally, the feds will come in and they'll shut your study down. And they'll shut your university studies down. I've had a couple of colleagues at major universities in which a researcher ignored the IRB. The IRB said, don't do this, do this. I'm the scientist. Who are you? They did it. Federal government found out. Federal government came in literally with federal marshals, shut the study down, and banned the university from further studies for years. It cost them tens of millions of dollars. So never ignore it. Listen, the IRB is your ally. They are not your enemy. They're not your opponent. They're colleagues. In fact, you will serve on IRB process. I've served on them. They're your friend. See them as colleagues in your research. They will point out things that you may have missed. And if you follow their rules, if you follow their ruling, you're legally and morally protected in your research. So it's really very, very crucial to do this. So just remember, the reason in fact, we can talk about sinful humanity. That's why the IRB emerged, because we are imperfect. We do wrong things. We do things we shouldn't. We're selfish. The last lecture talked about the integrity. Well, sometimes we want to make the data happen, and we'll violate the rules to make it happen. Don't do that. The IRB is always your friend. The IRB is always there to help you. And in the process, if I have any questions about my research, guess who I call? Dr. Ongo, who directs our IRB process. There's a big plaque on his wall that says Director of Research Integrity. It is his job to make sure we follow the most ethical rules. As Christians, that shouldn't be a question for us. As Christians, as believers in God, we want to do what's right. And the IRB process reminds us to do what is right. So I'm hoping as we go through this training process, it is not with resentment, it is not with skepticism, but with enthusiastic acceptance and participation. IRB at your institution is your friend, your colleague. Always treat them at that. Any question you have, if I should do that, does that violate what I said I would do, give them a call. They'll keep you out of trouble. And when you publish your research, and I actually believe you should publish your research. I have a cartoon on my office door. When I first went to the University of Miami in 1973, it was publish or perish there. And they gave us a cartoon. It was we call it in the United States a mafia hitman. He was putting a silencer on his gun as he came into professor's office. Professor looked startled. The dean said, "I told you when I hired you, it's publish or perish." Okay, that's a little strong, but one of the responsibilities we have is to communicate what we found, because remember, benefit. Does it make a difference in the world? If we don't publish, we can never make a difference. Every journal of any repute says the first thing you have to tell them is, this study was approved by my institution's review board. An integrity journal will never publish an article unless you follow the IRB rules. So your research is bad, wrong, you get in trouble, you may go to jail, you'll never get more funds, your institution will be shut down, and you'll never publish. Again, please see what Dr. Ongo is going to tell you the next day or two as your friend, as your colleague, as your ally, so that your integrity, you can impact the world because you did it right. So welcome to this week's training. I hope you benefit. I hope you learn a lot and see the IRB as your ally and friend and colleague in everything you do in your scholarship. Thank you.
Keep your questions. We will have a forum of questions and answers after 2 presentations. So please keep your questions.
If you can just go a little bit back on your program. This time is for our guest of honor. If you look at your program, it's 10:50. At 10:50, we were supposed to have Professor Walter Oyawa, who is Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the National Commission of Science, Technology, and Innovation, in short, NACOSTI. Instead, we have Director, Research, Accreditation, and Quality Assurance of NACOSTI. So Boniface Wekesa is representing Professor Walter Oyawa, and we are grateful that we have a representative from the Kenyan government here with us to speak to us and to open to address all of us as the guest of honor. Mr. Wekesa, you are welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As it has already been mentioned, my name is Boniface Wekesa from the National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation, a director responsible for matters of research, accreditation, and quality assurance. I'm here to represent Professor Walter Oyawa, who is the Director General of the National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation, who is not able to join you today because he has traveled out of the country on another official assignment. He therefore asked me to come and be able to deliver his remarks this morning. So this is not a presentation, but it is a speech that I want to read. Those of you who are familiar with government, whenever some work has been delegated to you and you have a speech, you just go and read the speech. And if people have any questions thereafter, we can be able to address them. So I'll, without wasting much time, let me go to the speech that I have to present this morning. Professor Vincent Injeti, Vice Chancellor, Adventist University of Africa, Professor Rispa War, DVC, Academic and Administration, Professor Duane McBride, Executive Director, Institute for the Prevention of Addiction, Andrews University, the USA, distinguished resource persons that are present here, the members of the Fourth Estate, I hope they are there, all protocols observed, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. May I take this opportunity on behalf of the management of the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation, NACOSTI, to congratulate the Adventist University for Africa for organizing this very important collaborative training in research ethics and specifically on promoting research integrity. I also want to thank the management of AUA for inviting me to preside over this official opening session. I would like to thank you for your continuous support in ensuring compliance with research regulations in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, the mandate of NACOSTI is to regulate and assure quality in science, technology, and innovation sector, and to advise government on matters related thereto. The Science, Technology and Innovation Act of 2013 established NACOSTI and assigned 17 functions which can be summarized into 4. These are the regulation, advisory, promotion, and coordination of matters of science, technology, and innovation. Our participation in this conference is part of the promotion functions. We therefore are happy to be associated with the theme of this conference, which I'm informed is promoting research integrity. And this is a trainer of trainers seminar for investigators and ethics administrators. This theme is quite appropriate and timely, given the global challenges we are in that have been occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. The issues of research integrity are not only concerns for institutions, but also of national and international interest. I therefore note with appreciation the international nature of the participants in this training. Research integrity is about conducting research in a way that allows others to have trust and confidence in the methodologies as well as the final product of research. In science, of course, it is not about the final product, but it's about the process. So if the process has some loopholes or weaknesses, then you cannot trust the outcome of that process. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to reiterate that research integrity applies to the whole process of a research life cycle. beginning with the proposal development, which is done by the principal investigator, proposal approvals by the various agencies that are concerned, and finally, field undertaking the actual research within the field, publication and dissemination of the findings. This process is clearly embedded in the Science, Technology and Innovation Act of 2013. Thus, research integrity for us at NACOSTI as a regulator is our core business. One of our core functions is research licensing. I would like to reiterate that the purpose of research licensing by NACOSTI is to ensure several things, among others, national security, protection of lives of Kenyans, public safety, protection of cultural values, safeguard of intellectual property rights of individuals as well as communities, protection of the environment, and sustainable development. And finally, research quality. All these are related to research integrity. Therefore, research integrity is a reflection of the individual research project, the institution, its researchers, and the wider research community. It's therefore gratifying to note that this is the focus of discussion for the next 2 days. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly talk about research under pandemics and health emergencies. As we go through the COVID-19 pandemic, there is need to ensure that countries have adequate research capacities to ensure effective and efficient response to infectious disease outbreaks. This calls for the need to inbuild ethical principles and values in national as well as international research ethics guidelines. And these, again, need to be upheld, and especially during these public health emergencies. In this regard, research ethics preparedness constitutes an important foundation for an effective response to infectious disease outbreaks and other health emergencies. The breakthroughs that we have witnessed in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic so far can be attributed to the enormous financial investments in research, science, and technology. It is through research that we have been able to find some of the solutions, including the development of vaccines that have unraveled the challenges related to COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, with regard to research, I would like to summarize that several lessons that we have learned as a regulator as follows. One, that the global pandemic highlights the importance of research, stable research infrastructure, and funding for public health emergencies and disaster preparedness, response, and resilience. Two, that the ultimate COVID-19 mitigation and crisis resolution is dependent on high-quality research aligned to top priority societal goals that yield trustworthy data and actionable information. Three, that scientific and technological knowledge and resources have never been greater and have been leveraged globally to perform COVID-19 research. At NACOSTI, we witnessed the number of studies related to COVID-19 increasing by day. The scope and the magnitude of engagement is stunning, and the extent of global collaboration unprecedented. As a nation, we need to invest more in research, science, and technology and innovation. We need to work towards investing at least 2% of the gross domestic product in research and development, as has been provided for in the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act of 2013. This can only be possible if private sector invests more in research. Unfortunately, private sector investment in R&D is still very low. I want to challenge research institutions and universities whose core mandate is on research to devote more resources for R&D. NACOSTI will therefore continue to promote and encourage private sector involvement in scientific research and innovation and development as articulated within the STI Act. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to briefly inform you that NACOSTI is working towards full implementation of the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act of 2013. And some of the ongoing activities that may be of interest to you include the following. There is the development in consultation with stakeholders, the priorities in scientific and technological and innovation activities in Kenya in relation to economic and social policies of government, and the country's international commitment. A draft STI priorities have been developed and are currently under stakeholder consultation. Within this science, technology, and innovation priorities, we will be coming out with research priorities for the period 2023 to 2027. The current research priorities were developed in 2017 and are set to end in 2022. The strengthening of institutional scientific and ethics review committees is ongoing, and this is being done in line with the legal notice number 106 on relevance and quality assurance regulations of 2014. As a first step to this, the National Bioethics Committee, which provides oversight for the institutional scientific and ethics review committees, has been reconstituted and renamed the National Scientific and Ethics Review Committee with increased mandate. We are currently in the process of reviewing the guidelines for accreditation of institutional ethics review committees so that now they be transformed into institutional scientific and ethics review committees, or INSACs. The institutions must ensure that all proposals obtain clearances from these committees before they are submitted to NACOSTI for consideration of a grant of a license. The mandate of the institutional scientific and ethics review committees will include, among others, to ensure that all research being undertaken within the jurisdiction are licensed by NACOSTI in accordance with the Act and are beneficial to national development agenda and do not endanger the national security or public safety or national cohesion or environment or nature or intellectual property rights of communities. They'll also be expected to monitor the implementation of the approved and licensed research proposals, including spot checks, management of databases, and transfer of specimens and research materials, and ensure compliance with the set regulations. They'll also be expected to encourage and ensure proper management and dissemination of research findings, including publications in recognized journals and application for patents or utility models as appropriate. And the other mandate, which in addition to what they're already doing, is to register and to regulate researchers in your institution and affiliate institutions, as well as independent applicants, and submit quarterly and annual reports to NACOSTI on the same. And finally, they will also be expected to advise on institutional intellectual property management, including identification of potential of patenting, registration, and commercialization of research findings and outcomes. In recognition of researchers, the Commission on NACOSTI is set to recognize researchers through the development of guidelines for registration and licensing of researchers as per the provisions contained in the legal notice number 106 under section 15, subsection 1. Other activities going on is providing guidance on dissemination of research findings. Again, in this respect, guidelines are being developed and are being shared again with the stakeholders for the accreditation of journals in Kenya. And finally, there is the implementation of national research priorities, which I already mentioned earlier for 2018-2022. And there is the monitoring and evaluation of registered research institutions, again, as provided for in the Act. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stress that it is important that research is carried out, should observe the highest standards of quality and ethics. This is in order to inspire public confidence and trust. Research findings should move to the next level where they can be used to inform policy. We want to challenge researchers to endeavor to develop policy briefs upon conclusion of their research to ensure immediate utilization of their research findings. Always ensure that research ethics and integrity are considered at all stages of research proposal development and implementation. And NACOSTI shall continue to engage you as very important stakeholders as we contribute towards the realization of Kenya's Vision 2030, which aims to transform Kenya into a newly industrializing middle-income country, providing high quality of life to all citizens by 2030 in a clean and secure environment. Finally, I wish you a 2-day of fruitful engagement. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wekesa. Dr. Ongo, I want to say to Mr. Wekesa that this is a Kenyan lent to Andrews University to work on the same things that you are working on here. And we are very proud of him on what he's doing somewhere else in diaspora. We are grateful to the Kenyan government and to NACOSTI for giving us a guest of honor for this training. So we want to thank Mr. Wekesa heartedly. Let us clap for him for taking time to come and represent the Kenyan government at this particular training of trainers in ethics. We thank you very much, and we thank him very much and trust that he will take our appreciation to Professor Oyawa. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, you look like you are attending a very serious program. We are here to learn, so wear a learning face. It is now my privilege to introduce to you somebody very important, a friend, a colleague, a comrade with whom we have journeyed for a long time. This is none other than Dr. Ongo Mordecai. We went to school together in Baraton, University of East Africa. Then he moved to Andrews University, where he did his middle and terminal degree. And then that institution shows his talent and tapped him back. So right now he is Research and Integrity and Compliance Officer at Andrews University. What does he do? In addition to what you have been told, let me just summarize them again. He provides regulatory oversight to conduct research involving human subjects. He also conducts training to faculty and students for the whole campus. He is the secretary of the research body, branch of which has brought us here. And one thing he forgot to tell me is that wherever I teach my research class, wherever I'm teaching my students, whether undergraduate or graduate, when it comes to ethical considerations, I usually bring him to teach that section because he's an expert of that area. And that is what he has come to teach you about. And so we want to give him undivided attention that we will continue in the pathway we have been advised, that we will be better researchers, principals, investigators, and even whatever outcome we have from research will inform the policy. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. Hello, everyone. Mko, hamjambo. See, everyone is Kenyan today, Dr. Dwayne Jambo. Just say Jambo. There you go. Hello. I'm so delighted to be here back home and to get the opportunity for us to learn together, actually. We are all experts at this, right? Otherwise, what does epistemology teach us? We all parts to the whole knowledge that we are trying to share and to learn from. May I ask, by a show of hands, how many of you serve in ethics review committees here? Thank you. How many are researchers? That's all of us, right? Thank you. So we are all going to learn together. And this particular presentation we are going to do right now is more or less an extension of what Professor Dwayne shared, and we will be looking at some of the unethical human experiments. You know, we tend to look in the past, but as we do research, I've come to realize that we sometimes do continue doing unethical experiments or studies. And so the idea here is that we can learn and that we can minimize. Because as you will see in some of the cases, there are costs that come with doing research unethically. And so those are the things we'll be looking at. I will also mention about research misconduct. We will be looking at AHSRA, responsible conduct in research, on another day. But I would mention some things about that when we talk about research misconduct, there are three things that come to mind. Falsification of data, right? You get the data and you just try to make it say what you want it to say instead of letting the data speak for itself. We'll also talk about, research misconduct also talks about fabrication of data. You are interfering with the environment in which you are collecting the data. And one that you will find a lot of people are culprits of is plagiarism, especially in this digital age. It's so easy just to copy and paste. Those three constitute research misconduct. And so in this presentation, we'll make some allusions when we look at the unethical experiment. So let's dive into this. Am I connected to the... Oh, we're getting a cable. In the meantime, let me say some things here. From this training, a few things should come to mind often. The medical and social behavioral science ethicists and researchers commonly hold certain general rules for an ethical experiment or studies. And these terms or things include that experiments should be socially valuable and scientifically valid. Another one is that when you conduct research with subjects, that there should be a fair selection, and you have to show respect, as Dr. Duane talked about that. You have to talk about risks and benefits. There has to be some balancing act that you want to do when you are doing research. There is no need of doing research in which risks outweigh the benefits. The IRBs or ethics review committees won't allow you to do that. And let me remind ourselves that when we are reviewing protocols, when we are proposing research that we are going to do, we should always engage ethics as a critical component in our proposal or in the review of the conduct of research involving human subjects. A human experimentation that violates the principles of biomedical and social behavioral ethics, such practices are not encouraged. And they include denying patients or subjects the right to one, informed consent, using pseudo-scientific frameworks such as race science, and some of them you will see involve torturing people. Dr. Duane talked about the pilgrim research that involved, shocking people with increasing a voltage until they were, the pain level was just so high, but some people continued to administer the shock. So when you look at that, you will see some of those are newspaper publications. The New York Times has that picture about the syphilis victims in the US. Stanford University, county prison, we will be looking at that. The one at the corner with the guy with the wires on his head, they're trying to change his gender. Kind of weird, right? How do you change the gender? There it is. Then the Nazi medical science, and then, of course, the last one is pictured in Africa. I want you to begin thinking about this. What is right when you engage in the conduct of research? What is it you can do when no one else is looking? Are you doing the right thing, or you're doing the wrong thing? Let that sink and let it go through your mind as we go through these experiments. And in some of those, I will invite you to also engage the speaker. You let us know what you think. Okay? Sorry, I didn't advance. Ask yourself the following question. Who is the principal investigator in these experiments we are looking at? And who are the subjects? Are they children? Are they mentally impaired people? Are they prisoners? Are they people from low-income groups? Are they healthy adults? Whatever. Ask those questions because when you review protocols, there are regulatory requirements, not only in the US, but in host countries. Internationally, we have what is called Harmonization Conference, which is a list of many regulations that apply to how we do medical or behavioral science research. And I want you to pick what you find as unethical in some of these examples that we'll be looking at, okay? So Stanford prison experiment. How many of you are familiar with that? By a show of hand. Okay, thank you, Dr. Dwayne. Stanford, took place at Stanford University in the psychology department a few years ago. Actually, there was a film that came out. And every year, it's now used they have a week at Stanford University where they teach ethics on how to do research, okay? The whole idea was to study human response to captivity, okay? And the effects on both authorities and inmates in prison. The principal investigator was Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He was a psychologist at Stanford. And the subjects were undergraduate volunteers who either served as guards and prisoners. And their prison was the basement of the psychology building, okay? 1/3 of the guards, 1/3 of the undergraduate students exhibited genuine sadistic tendencies as they were dealing with the prisoners. They were doing things that could cause harm. The prisoners, the other students, undergraduate students who volunteered to be prisoners, were emotionally traumatized. In fact, 2 of them had to be removed early from the research group just because of the level of harm. So there were emotional harm, psychological harm, and sometimes harm can be physical. Sometimes harm can be spiritual. And you, as a researcher or as a reviewer of a protocol, you have to look into this when you are reviewing or when you are proposing your study. The idea is to minimize the level of harm that you encounter in a study. If you are an investigator, you have to provide a mitigation on how to minimize the harm that is anticipated in the study. This is another example, an ethical human experiment. It's called the Science Club study. It took place in 1946 to 1953, Walter E. Fenold State in Massachusetts. It was actually sponsored by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and the Quaker Oats Corporation. 73 mentally disabled children were fed oatmeal containing radioactive calcium and other radioisotopes in order to track how nutrients were digested. Hello? Right? What do you think? Huh? Appalling. Hey, guess what? It was funded by the US government. And guess what? Researchers like you and I were doing this. Hey, those were very bad humans, don't you think? Now, the children were not told that they were being fed radioactive chemicals. and were told by hospital staff and researchers that they were joining a science club. Do you use deception when you are proposing to do research? Of course, I know there are times when deception could be useful, but in such cases, you have to do immediate release of information to your subjects. But otherwise, deception, like in this case, do you think it is ethical? The Willowbrook study. This one took place from the 1950s to 1972, right? Mentally disabled children. Looks like there's a pattern there with researchers. Dr. Duane talked about the burden of research. Sometimes researchers are notorious. They can look for a group that is easy to find. Mentally disabled children seems to be in that vulnerable group, and they are bearing the burden of the research in this case. And so what did they do at Willowbrook? This is a state school in Staten Island, New York. These mentally disabled children at Willowbrook were intentionally infected with viral hepatitis in research whose purpose was to help discover a vaccine. A common word today, we have the vaccines still undergoing what we call investigational new drug studies, right? And so these researchers were trying to find a vaccine. Well, look what they did. From 1963 to 1966, Saul Krugman of New York University promised the parents of these children that their children would be enrolled into Willowbrook in exchange for signing a consent form for procedures that he claimed were vaccinations. But what did they do? In reality, the procedures involved deliberately infecting the children with viral hepatitis by feeding them an extract made from the feces of patients infected with the disease. Are you there? How many of you are willing to do something like that? It's voluntary. You can just show up your hand. How many would say they don't want to do that? Show of hand. Feeding them with extracts made from the feces of patients infected with the disease is not a good way of trying to secure data in order for you to get a vaccine. In 1952, and I have the name Chester Southam there in emphasis in red. Mark Mr. or Dr. Southam. Sloan Kettering Institute researchers Chester injected live cancer cells into prisoners, another vulnerable group. In the United States, when you use subjects who fall in the vulnerable group, you have to know there is additional protection that govern that. So when you are reviewing protocols that involve either pregnant women or children or mentally disabled people or prisoners, there are additional regulatory requirements. And so here, Chester is injecting live cancer cells into prisoners, and half of the prisoners in this National Institute of Health sponsored study were black people like me. All right? Also at Sloan Kettering, 300 healthy women were injected with live cancer cells without being told. The doctors stated that they knew at the time that it might cause cancer, but they still went ahead to inject them with live cancer cells. What would you do? What is right? What's the right thing to do when no one is looking or when you're trying to design your research? What comes to your mind? especially when you think about the subjects. See, a lot of times the motivation is to just collect the data, and researchers like us tend to forget that we're dealing with human subjects. What did Chester do? Again, at the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital, 1962, 22 elderly patients at the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, were injected with the live cancer cells by Chester Southam. He looks like a very notorious character, right? Who in 1952 had done the same to prisoners at the Ohio State Prison in order to discover the secret of how healthy bodies fight the invasion of malignant cells. Now look here. The administration of the hospital attempted to cover the study up. But the New York State Medical Licensing Board ultimately placed Southam on a probation for 1 year. Now, 2 years later, the American Cancer Society elected him as their vice president. Now, this is wrong. I hope you agree with me. This is not how you do research. Remember, you are dealing with human subjects, and you don't want to put them in harm. And what we are telling us here today is that we have to be ethical when we are proposing our studies, when we are reviewing the protocols that come before us, so that the humans are protected from any form of harm, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, spiritual, whatever. So what is the right thing to do? That's the question you have to answer yourself. The Latin word caveat emptor says, let the buyer beware. As researchers, we have shared responsibility for creating an institutional culture of respect and trust in the protection of the rights and welfare of human subjects. Whether you are an institutional official, whether you are an investigator, or whether you are serving on ethics review committee, we all have a shared responsibility. And when we fail, then the enterprise fails. There are consequences to institutions, to individuals. Wakefield and others published in Lancet 1998. How many of you know about this study? Dr. Duane knows that. The paper was retracted, right? Following the judgment of the UK General Medical Council's Fitness to Practice panel on January 28, 2020, it has become clear that several elements of the 1998 paper by Wakefield are incorrect, contrary to the findings of an earlier investigation. In particular, the claims in the original paper that children were consecutively referred, and the investigations were approved by the local ethics committee, have been proven to be false. So what were they doing here? Their claims of children consecutively being referred was false. They also said that their protocol was approved by the local ethics review committee. That was also false. So what were they doing? They conducted a study that wasn't approved. And in that study, there were other false claims. So if you are a reviewer or an ethics committee office, be aware that there are investigators who may be sneaking studies and conducting them, approaching, recruiting subjects and conducting those studies, hoping that nobody will notice. But guess what? When you publish, people begin to read, right? Hey, did you know once I got a call from a journal in Europe because there was a publication that was presented, but the research proposal never came to IRB, or Ethics Review Committee. And we had to put the research team through training again, and that publication never happened. Just like Dr. Duane said, publishers will call. They will try to find out if the research has been approved by the local institutional review board or the ethics review committee, as it's called in a number of countries around the world. So Wakefield and others in this ileal lymphoid nodular hyperplasia non-specific colitis and pervasive developmental disorder in children study is no longer valid. The retraction took place. And some people actually relied on that paper and have done citations. If you go online, you will find some people who have actually cited this study. Are we together? All right. See, sometimes in church, when they preach, you hear the people say, Amen. What's theater? I was just trying to see if there is any camper person in the audience. Amen. So I got one, right? Okay. Stem cell scientist found dead in apparent suicide. Anybody know about this? 2014. That was a stem cell, renowned world stem cell researcher in Japan. He also had a lab assistant who was part of that study, and the other investigator from a university in Massachusetts, Boston, University of Boston. So following the judgment of, the title here is wrong, but I'll come to him. That was a Japanese renowned researcher, and the study was published in a journal called Nature. Okay? So in 2014, around March, it was retracted. And we will come across it here. But here is another consequence of repeated misconduct I talked about earlier. Duke University to pay $112.5 million to settle claims of research misconduct. I translated that based on Kenya's exchange rate yesterday. That is $12.6 billion. That the university is going to pay because a researcher has committed research misconduct. This is what the university president had to say. And by the way, this is not many, many years ago. This is 2019, okay? Vincent E. Price, president of Duke University, said, "This is a difficult moment for Duke. This case demonstrates the devastating impact of research fraud and reinforces the need for all of us to have a focused commitment on promoting research integrity and accountability." And you know what he did? He lied on his grant proposal. He made a false statement on his grant proposal. You see, did you know that grant proposals also get reviewed by IRBs or ethics review committees? And he lied. So can you trust this person with the human subjects? And that is what the university, so AUA or Kisii University or Kemri or the Kenyan government paying $12.6 billion because somebody is lying on his research. Do you see your responsibility here? Do you see, in the US they tell us that we in ethics review committees, our job, part of our job, even though it is to help protect the welfare and rights of human subjects, it is also to help researchers from going to jail. Amen for that. Look here what he has done to the university. I think the university must love him now. Probably gave him tenure and things like that. Anybody disagree with that? It's kind of expensive, right? Don't you think? Department of Justice. This is in the year 2021, May of 2021, which means it's less than a year from now, right, since it happened. And this was put as for immediate release. An Ohio man, a rheumatologist, professor, and researcher with strong ties to China, was sentenced to 37 months in prison for making false statements to federal authorities as part of an immunology research fraud scheme. As part of his sentence, Zhang, the researcher, was also ordered to pay more than $3.4 million in restitution to the National Institute of Health and approximately $413,000 to the Ohio State University. That's a researcher like you and I. So he's going to jail for 37 months, and he's paying $3.4 million. Then he's paying $413,000. He must have a very good reputation. Upon the completion of his jail sentence, the university will just employ him back, right? You see, you ruin your career when you don't uphold research integrity. And when we talk about RCR, responsible conduct of research, we will be able to see that. You lose trust within the research community because nobody can rely on things that you share in publication or things, conduct of your studies. So we have to be very careful when we do research with human subjects. I know I'm still sharing, but do you know of any example that you may have seen around at your institution? No, not at your institution. You can make it hypothetical. You know, like when I'm sending questions to the Fed, I don't say it's from Andrews University. It's somebody somewhere is thinking about something. What do you think? But we are all working together, even with the government. We have to develop that rapport so that we hold this enterprise with dignity that it deserves. Now that I've said that, I think you are free to share your own experience. What have you encountered in your journey as a researcher? Have you seen people committing research misconduct? You have. Could you just share? Yeah. Do we have a mic somewhere? Yeah. Oh, just come near me here. I'm harmless.
I was saying that I don't know what the policies are maybe at this end, but at my university currently, at Gothenburg University, I know of students who have been suspended from school because of issues of plagiarism.
Mm. Plagiarism is huge. It's huge. In fact, so PubMed has put, medical publications journal. They have something that from your abstract alone, it will pull out some of the keywords that actually link to things that are plagiarized. So even before they make it, they run it through, at Andrews, we have what we call turn it in. You have it here too. So you put it in there, and it shows exactly where the things have come from. Hey, I also know of one in UK a few years ago where the professor was working with the students, PhD students in his lab, and they were falsifying data. And you know the sad thing? When it was found that he had falsified data in his publications, all the PhD students who had gone under him, all their PhDs were recalled. Think about that. That is what unethical research experiments or research studies or research misconduct will earn you. So people pay sometimes, yeah, come over. Sometimes people pay to go to school if they are not funded, and all that went to waste because of unethical practice. Go ahead, Dr. Dixon.
Yes. In classroom, many times we deal with students who falsify and fabricate data. But while I was a student at Moi University, I remember one of my colleagues falsified data. And at the point when we were at almost graduating, the professors, the committee who attended him, forced him to start a new journey again in research while others were graduating. He couldn't take it, and he committed suicide.
See, tragic end of something that could have been avoided. Come over. See, those are the things that we are responsible for preventing. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just also wanted to point out the role of students and the level of integrity that they need to exhibit when they are writing their proposals. I want to give an experience that I had in South Africa, where I was at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I was supervising a postgraduate student whose studies was about crime in an informal settlement in Durban. And in the proposal, after reading it, it was supposed to go to the ethics committee. After I'd read the proposal, he added something without returning it to me. And he mentioned that in that study, he's going to do a focus group discussion with a group of people in the neighborhood who had experienced violent crime. And he said that at times they will relive their sad memories and they may break down. So if they break down, he'll give them time to cool off before he goes on with the experiment. So with the focus group discussion. So the ethics committee wrote back and asked specifically how we were going to deal with that section. Then asked the student, I never saw this. Why did you just fix it in before taking it to the ethics committee? He said, no, I just thought about it and added. I said, everything has consequences. Such a choice, now you see we have to redo this. So I had to ask him, where you are going to do the study, does the county government or the municipality have a department of counseling? Then he said yes. Then you have to talk to that department of counseling that in the event that these people may relive the sad memories, then they will offer professional counseling. So that is what we added, and that's how the paper now passed. So it is very important for students to work very closely with the supervisors, because there could be something your supervisor can see which you are not able to see from the onset.
Thank you. Thank you for those examples. Yes, go ahead.
You know, Dr. Ongo, one thing that we seem to forget most of the time is that you may engage yourself.
Turn around, face.
You may engage yourself in ethical misconduct or research misconduct, and you may get away.
You can come here. Thank you.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you may think you will get away with it now. At least I have known 2 people who have gotten their PhD through the dubious means, and it has to do with plagiarism. But with time, they were discovered. And their PhD degree has to be revoked. Imagine you have studied and suffered and gotten your PhD conferred on you, and maybe 10 years down the line, that degree has to be taken away from you. So let us not think that we may engage in ethical misconduct and we can get away with it. It may catch you up later in life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So there are consequences. Yes, please. Come over.
Thank you. You are right that actually there are consequences when it comes to whatever we are discussing here. But then there's something that is really concerning and it is really disturbing. Now, suppose it comes to a situation whereby students have graduated, they have done their work genuinely, but they cited papers which have maybe been retracted. And they have been given PhDs, they have been given master's degrees. Very many people here, maybe many years after you graduated, if we look at your thesis, maybe you quoted papers that were retracted. What is going to be done with you?
Good question. The good thing is that the papers that are retracted can be found. And it is indicated retracted, just like the one. So the understanding is not that you misquoted something. You did the right quotation or citation for that matter, and so your study is good. You did not commit any research misconduct. But as you do citations, always verify. Make sure that your citation is from a valid source, that the paper you are citing is solid. But I've never seen consequences on those who have cited papers that have been retracted. Dr. Duane, you're... If you didn't know it, it's probably okay. If you knew it... Right, right. So in research misconduct, we know there is the intentional error. And then there is error that occurs not because you planned it. That is allowed. Uh-huh. Well, one single citation may not impact the outcome of a study so much. Usually we cite to help build a case for our argument, but many papers cite more than one. So I don't think the quality is impacted significantly. You may have to revise it. Yeah, you may have to revise that in a publication or something. Right. Oh, okay. All right. You had something, Dr. Dixon? Mm-hmm.
Live with them if we are not careful. At times we may be in positions whereby, of course, positions of influence, whereby you take some people to do research on your behalf, and then you put your name there as having done it. It has happened. And I think you in the church system, you know that it costed somebody his job. Yeah, we have people who have been in administration. When they realize that that is what happened, then they had to take you out of position and bring people with integrity. Maybe it is only in some countries where you can be in a position and you have people doing the research and they still call you a doctor.
Right. Okay, I will be inviting Dr. Dwayne and our friend from Nakosi to come up front to answer questions. But this is what I want us to take out of these unethical human experiments. People committed harm or conducted experiments unethically that brought harm to others. We see that people continue to do. So it is more of a sin problem. The human tends to stick to things that are not right. We want to say this, that as researchers in this century from Africa, we want to be the best. We want to make sure that we do not continue research misconduct, and that where we see one, we try to nip it in the bud. Teach ethics at your institutions. We do that. I've gone to a lot of federal training conducted by the Office of Human Subject Protections in the United States. Every year we do that. Today they've become more readily available, and we have resources that you could tap into so that we promote research integrity in such a way that we put our researchers on the map, that our publications could go all over the world. Today, in some institutions like ours, we have the digital commons. How many know about digital commons? Your work speaks to people, scholars around the world. So let us, when we review protocols, have that ethics eye. Help the researchers not to violate humans when they conduct research. Help researchers not to commit research misconduct as we conduct research in this century. Thank you very much. I hope you got something from this, and we look forward to engaging more. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 103 people online, and a lot of questions have come. And then we will take care of those questions. But we have about 25 minutes to go for lunch. So we will take 3 questions from here, and we will take those questions from online. Then we will break for lunch. How many of us with us here have questions? Let me see before. 1, 2, 3. First 3. Very good. So Calvin, give the phone to them. And we have our 3 gentlemen here who will attend to those questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm David Butekanga from Bugema University in Uganda. I was thinking when you were presenting, where is the source? You know, when you have a patient who comes early for treatment, it's better to deal with than a patient with an advanced disease. And I was thinking, when we are teaching undergraduates, I do teach undergraduates, and even when you give them assignments, you know, they do not only falsify the results, there is plagiarism, there is what, and if we don't handle it at that point, then that person will get a PhD which is falsified and will become a researcher who is falsified. Yeah, we need to do something. I'm not touching it yet. Of course, I do when I talk to them. I say, this work, I'm not going to mark it. I've looked at it. You copied it. It is, you know, go and redo. But how do we handle this so that it does not develop into a big disease? That's the general question. I want to stop there.
Okay, thank you. Who will handle that question?
I've taught a lot, so yeah, that's something I've dealt with a lot. you don't want to destroy a young person at this point. Look, the worst case I had was a student turned in a term paper that I had published. It was a government report. They didn't see my name at the end, and they turned it in as theirs. I mean, of all the stupid things to do is turn in your prof's paper. So Andrews has a series of things you do, that first of all, they do flunk that paper. And generally, they have to acknowledge what they did. They have to redo the paper, and it enters their file as a first offense. But if it happens again, they are disciplined and even dismissed. But I think, part of Christianity is forgiveness, but you can't keep forgiving sins in terms of the integrity of your profession. Jesus may have said 70 times 7, that your patient's not going to say 70 times 7. So we really have to recognize they have to understand it was wrong. They have to write some sort of an essay recognizing that was wrong, and that they have to make a strong pledge never to do it again. And if they do it again, Andrews will, that will be a disciplinary cause. So it is a combination of learning if they're young, but if we nip it in the bud, if we stop it then, their career is not destroyed. Dr. Ongo talked about prison. I have a couple of colleagues who went to prison at the University of Miami. They went to prison actually because they stole money. That's another thing he's going to talk about. When you have funding, don't steal the money, because that's another sure way to go to prison. So part of integrity is you spend the money as you said you would. You don't make up names to hire, and you don't say you're going to a conference and you go to a ski resort in Colorado. So integrity at every level. But if you're a student, you have to kind of deal with them early on. But if they continue, they must be dismissed. But a discipline at the beginning can save prison in the future and a ruined career in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. My name is William Swipra. Just quick one. So they are in series, but you can answer them together. Is there a no-go area in research in human research subjects? How do we learn from the known or unknown? I'm asking in terms of ethics. Is it a matter of disclosure when it comes to ethics? The last one is, can we exonerate a researcher if his work has passed through the ethics review board, but we still find that there's a problem? So let me come again. First one,
ask them one by one.
Is there a no-go area in human research subject in line of ethics because of the examples we were giving and all of that? An area. A no-go area. Can we say because yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's a very good question. Yeah, you can't freeze people near to death and try and resuscitate them. And this is part of what an IRB does, is that there are areas that, that ethically can't be touched. For example, right now, there's very sensitive areas in ethnicity in the United States. I'm Irish. And there was a time when my people made up the vast majority of criminals in the United States. In fact, there's a police wagon that hauls people around the United States. They call it a paddy wagon, named after my people, the Irish. But right now, I probably couldn't do research that says, I want to see if Hispanics are more innately criminal than African Americans. I don't think that would go through. See? So it is ethically sensitive.
So the next one is, then how do we learn from either the known or unknown?
Yeah, no, I mean, all right, you do, but yeah, there are political issues that, that make it very, very difficult. And for example, right now, the issue of gay rights in the United States is very big. I could not propose a study in which I would propose, I'm going to cure you of your gayness. Right?
And that was one of the pictures that had the wires.
Yes,
it
that
was
is
all
correct.
about that.
That is correct. Mm-hmm. So look, and part of this does relate political, but it's also inherently wrong. In other words, if I were looking at why some ethnic groups are inherently criminal, that could result in huge discriminations against them. Huge discriminations. And who's criminal, at least in the United States, varies by time and place. Again, the vast majority of people in prison in 1900 were my people, the Irish. I come from a long line of criminals. In fact, I have an ancestor who kept lying on the census because there were arrest warrants for him all over the country. So criminality is much more related to time and place and cultural development. And so it's very difficult to propose a research like, I want to look at why Irish are inherently evil and criminal and alcoholics. Probably it's not going to go through. But right now, the political sensitivity of gayness.
Right.
And these are not, science is also within the political context.
The last one, and we give the opportunity.
Our study that came to our IRB at one time was about somebody recruiting women in Sudan, southern Sudan, and converting them from Islam to Christianity. That's very sensitive because we know in South Sudan there's a death penalty for the conversion, right? And you want to collect data from those people. So one, researchers must be very aware of the population they are trying to study. They have to know the sensitivity of their proposed study. The IRB acts as the checkpoint to ensure that the subjects are actually safe, that their welfare, their rights are maintained, their confidentiality are maintained at all times. So the researcher, when you propose a study, of course, you're doing your background, you're looking at the literature, you'll be able to be informed by the literature on that area of study that you are venturing into. And it would show whether people have actually conducted a study similar to that. Okay. Yours is just to add value to the knowledge base that's already been created. If that is primarily renewed,
you're asking tough questions.
Thank you. Let me get one more question from here. The time is ticking now. This one is directed directly to Mr. Wakesa. It says, and it's a very important question because most of us are from academic institutions and we are students here. The question says by one Daniel Otieno. He says, is it necessary for master's students to get IRB approval for purely academic research? Purely academic research. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Otieno, for your question. I think the simple answer is yes, that every research must go through ethics review committee, irrespective. Even when you are dealing with secondary data, you still have to pass it, and there is a way in which that proposal is going to be evaluated. There was also a question that somebody asked, I think there, he said whether we can exonerate a researcher if the work had gone through an IRB. I think the greatest responsibility is on the PI, so the PI takes responsibility for any research misconduct. However, we have also seen situations like this in this country where issues of fabrication of data has gone through up to the level of publication, and when it was published, the institution that was being quoted as having provided the data did not have a capacity to handle that enormous amount of data. So they raised a red flag, and what happened was that it was referred back to us to find out whether that institution exists and whether the ethics approval letter also was genuine. Upon investigation, we realized that the letter was not genuine because somebody falsified even that document, because the number associated with that letter is not the number of that protocol that was being talked about. And of course, it involved faculty. This was a student, undergraduate student, did very excellent work, of course, looked very excellent, but it was all falsification and fabrication of data. But the faculty, senior professors were involved in terms of assisting the student to come up with that publication, analysis of data, and so on and so forth. We did investigate that case. We have documented it, and perhaps it's one of those cases that we'll want to share, but not disclosing the names, but something that you need to study. Because what happens after the student has graduated and somebody has gotten a master's out of it and another one has gotten promotion out of it because of publication? Do you rip everything down? I think that is food for thought. But the bottom line is that the PI takes responsibility. On our part, we have reprimanded such a committee.
PI, you mean the principal investigator?
Yes, principal investigator. Yeah, the author of the research. That's the one I'm talking about, the PI. So on our part, we have reprimanded the committee and asked that the members of the committee who are there disqualify themselves from any further review of proposals in the university. Thank you.
There is this question. It would be good for us to know what pertains in Andrews University and what the policy says as far as NACOSTI is concerned. The question is, and it's coming from one Bon Jonjo online, the question is, what is the acceptable percentage of plagiarism in academic writing?
Hey, look, as a teacher, I had one student who had 0% from any other source. I thought, whoa, I read it. It was the worst thing I've ever read in my life. It was nonsensical, okay? So look, in spite of how brilliant each of us are, you are not the first person to think of a phrase or some words. So inevitably, some things that you write, other people have said. And so when I look at something, basically, if it's ticking more than about 20%, I'll really study it. And I'll even look at that 20%. But, as Solomon said, is it Solomon? There's nothing new under the sun. But it must be said in a new way, a new nuance, a new ways of phrasing it. So I always look, when those 25%, I kind of look where it is. But it's often like 4 words here, 4 words there. It's not overwhelming. I don't know what you look at.
I was just going to say that you lose your voice when you plagiarize.
Oh, yes, right.
You don't make any ground or a position for yourself in that area of study you are engaging in. Of course, words are not new. They have always been there. And so it is possible sometimes you may even come up with a phrase that is similar to what somebody has already published. And you will look at the percentage of how, and usually when you run them through softwares like Turnitin, it will actually show the source of where that is coming from. So it's easy to delineate.
As a teacher.
Yeah.
So again, if it's a whole paragraph, some problem. 4 words here and there, probably not. Look, I've got to say something. I was paid $1,000 by the United States government to fake data. They paid me $1,000 to fill out 100 questionnaires on substance use patterns. They paid 4 of us to fill out fake data, to be as accurate as we could. And then they collected 100 real cases. And do you know the difference? What do you think the difference was between fake data by experts and real data collected from real subjects? What do you think the difference might be? Real data looked too good. Real data was perfect. Real data had no outlying cases. So if the data is too good, maybe we should be suspicious.
My question is still not answered. What is the question says, what is the acceptable, here, it says, what is the acceptable percentage of plagiarism in academic writing?
None. Basically, if you give me a paragraph that's from someone else, you didn't cite it, I turn it back. It's either a flunk or you do it over.
I'll tell you a quick one that MedPub also found, and this involved a Japanese researcher who actually became the investigator, the publisher. He was publishing his own material.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. And you can also find that you plagiarize yourself. It depends on how you do the citation of your own work. So you have to be careful. I would say plagiarism 0%, but that does not mean you are not citing. It is the citation, how you cite, and there are standards out there, APA and others, that teach us how we should cite the work. Make sure that you are citing properly. Plagiarism, give credit. Don't steal somebody's work and make it look like yours.
Dr. Gan,
Yeah,
can I-
I'm just expanding more on that.
But if you cite accurately and everything is cited, that's not good either. Well, as I said, there are phrases that are just common in a culture that keep appearing. But if you're citing some conclusion from someone else, major points from someone else, and you don't quote it, that is plagiarism. But again, the only time I've had zero was the awful paper, just nonsense.
Yeah.
So there's always some level, but I always look at it because it tells you where it came from. But again, 3 or 4 words that are common somewhere else, not a problem. So, I don't have an exact percent, but boy, once it gets toward 20, I think there's really something wrong.
So, Mr. Wakesa, what does the policy say as far as NACOSTI is concerned?
Is there an official policy?
No, we don't have an official policy on that, but I know most universities is about 10% is acceptable limit, but we don't have any at NACOSTI.
Any policy? Okay.
Can
Let me take probably
can I
the
ask
last.
a question? Can I ask a question as you sift through? What is the position or the role of politics or politicians in research, particularly in NACOSTI? This is a government department, and then government is a part of politics. How far are you influenced by the politics when it comes to research in ethical issues?
So far, I wouldn't say that. I think research is an academic area, and politicians don't like venturing into academic. I mean,
depends on
yes. But just to let you know that us as NACOSTI, I think there are certain core values we hold very dear to, and some of those core values are about integrity and professionalism. Giving you one example is that a very good professor friend of mine, working very closely with us, gives me a call, and he says, you know what, I have this student who is just about to graduate, and we just realized he does not have an ethics, he does not have an NACOSTI license, and that is one of the requirements that they must have. So I asked, has the student done research? He said, yes, in fact, he has finished, and the supervisor is the boss of the university, meaning the vice chancellor. So the vice chancellor puts pressure on this director of research that ensure this student gets all the documents because I've supervised him and everything is okay. So I called the professor and said, so what do you want me to do? He said, is there a way you can assist this student? I said, we do not give licenses in retrospect. That's the bottom line, and that's it. If he can find his own way to do things that are unethical, that's it. But from my office and from this office, the answer is no.
And I would just add that maybe what the politicians should do is to promote research, set up a budget that goes to finance or fund research at our institutions. That's probably what I would say they should do.
Well, there are politics. Look, we have two different parties in the United States, Republicans and Democrats. I've been subpoenaed by Congress a couple of times. I chaired an NIH Grant Review Committee in which we funded a project to teach injecting drug users how to clean needles, and this is back in the HIV epidemic. Bleach kills the virus. And there was a congressman, a Republican, who strongly opposed that. And I was subpoenaed before Congress to justify why my committee would fund a project to clean needles, because everyone knows all that would do is increase injecting drug use. And so it can be complicated politically. I'm glad you don't have that in Kenya, but I had to deal with that once. And there's actually another one like that too. So I've been subpoenaed a few times for Congress, for committees I've chaired. And that was one of them. Look, the data really is, if people clean their needles, HIV really goes down. It doesn't increase injection drug use, but you really decrease AIDS and hepatitis and deaths. But there's a politician who wanted to raise campaign funds over that project.
Okay, let's take the third question from the floor. There were 3 of you. Yes. Or you asked your question already? No, you have not. We have 4 minutes more to go for lunch.
So there are consequences for violation of ethics. But there's something you just mentioned from there, that at some point some PhDs were withdrawn. I was feeling that that is rather very punitive. In Kenya here, for example, we had a lecturer in some university who had branchized the whole thesis of another student from Nigeria. And he had grown and even become a senior lecturer. So very many students had passed through his hands, and they had been given PhDs. We had another example again in a local university where a professor also was discovered that he had branchized part of his work. But this professor, very many students have also graduated and passed through his hands. Surely, I was just feeling it is a concern. I was feeling that you cannot really go retracting all those PhDs, all those masters. Maybe it's a food for thought you can contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, so every country or every institution have their own regulations for research. At institutional level, for example, at Andrews we have the Academic Standards Committee that looks into the integrity issues of what is done. The case I cited was in UK, and if you go back, I think it was covered by the media, and so it will be easy to find. So every institution, they have their own policies that govern how research is conducted and how they deal with cases that come up that violate the academic standards or human subject research. And globally, we have what is called the Harmonization Conference, which is a list of standards. And a country can choose to subscribe, but without really following. In the US, they subscribe, but they don't implement. They go by what the FDA and AHSRA regulations stipulate when it comes to research. At institutional level, every institution has ways on how they deal with violations.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one more question. Somebody can take 30 seconds to answer it. And the question is, what are the extra requirements in research dealing with vulnerable groups?
So regulations also, again, in the US, we have AHSRA, which revised what we call the common rule in 2018 by increasing the number of subsections of that. Is called, under review, we have exempt, category, expedited, and full convened meetings. When you go to the exempt category, you will find that children can be involved in certain studies that are, for example, educational, things that you'd ordinarily do in the classroom setup. But when you go to other levels that involve children, it pushes it to convened meeting, because then they become vulnerable subjects, which are necessitated by some of the cases that I mentioned. Those subjects, those protocols must be reviewed and determined by the board, not an individual. So subjects that involve children, pregnant women, because sometimes of the medicine understudy, because of the fetus, not necessarily the woman herself, but because of the fetus. Prisoners, because you can easily be manipulated to take part in a study because they think they're going to get a release from prison.
Right. If they participate in your study, they'll get out earlier. That's what they think.
Yeah. And so things like that, we have to be aware. And I would tell you in one proposal that somebody submitted that they wanted to work with people who leave prison to be reintegrated into the communities, but the researcher didn't realize that the inmate was actually trying to find a way on how to get to the person's house. and the researcher didn't realize that. But the IRB was able to detect that and helped the investigator. So vulnerable subjects, all those go to convened IRB meetings. And if you, in the US, if you are studying the prisoners, there has to be a prison representative on the board in person, right?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give a hand of applause to them. Thank you very much. It is time for us to go for lunch now. We are going strictly by our time, and so you have 1 hour wherever you are going to eat. You have 1 hour to go and eat and come back here at 2 o'clock. Those of you who have signed up for lunch, you have been given a card. And so you go up, go on that, that hill, go and take the steps to the next floor. On your right, there is a classroom where we have set up the food for you there. We would like to pray before we go for lunch, and may I request our registrar. Our registrar is here to come and pray for the food for us. Registrar, come. Dr. Angela Nwama. Let us rise up as we pray for the food.
Let's pray. Our gracious Father in heaven, we want to thank you, and we're so grateful unto you for your presence with us throughout this session. We pray, Lord, as we go for lunch, may your blessings be upon the food, the drinks, and all that we will take. And we pray also for the presenters who will be coming up after lunch, that you may also bless them. Thank you for answering our prayers. For in Jesus' name we have prayed.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Remember, we are coming back here what time? What time are we coming back?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. You can leave your items here. They are very safe. Leave them here, go for your food, and come back.
McBride from Andrews University. These two historic training programs, I believe, will greatly enhance your knowledge and understanding on the subject and sharpen your research skills, and also will help build capacity for ethics review committees, thereby improving the quality and reliability of research. Sometimes we notice, in an attempt to reach one's academic and career goals, researchers may be in a haste to overlook the ethical dimension. This conference is organized to put the spotlight on ethics in research. While there may be mechanisms for ensuring the ethical aspects in research in the form of ethical review approval and plagiarism policies, etc., we need to raise awareness and raise the bar on ethical dimensions of research. It is my sincere hope and prayer that at the end of the conference, we will not only be equipped with the knowledge on ethics in research, but also champion the cause of ethical research. At this time, I want to thank Professor Daniel Ganu, the president of AHSRA, the African chapter, and his team for organizing these two conferences. I have gone through the program and the titles of various presentations, and some excellent presentations are lined up for you, and take advantage of it. I wish each and every delegate a wonderful educative and learning experience as you attend these two conferences. Once again, we welcome you to Adventist University of Africa campus, and please let us know if you need any assistance. We are here to serve you. Karibu.